Listen, I get it. You like saving in Bitcoin. But check this out. You can actually complement your HODL position by investing in Bitcoin startups. If you want additional upside and enjoy learning about angel investing, you should check out Lightning Ventures. Lightning Ventures is a great way to stack real equity in Bitcoin-only companies. They've invested in businesses you've heard about on this show, including Azteco, Crowd Health, and Swan Bitcoin. And Lightning Ventures makes it easy to get started in the world of early stage investing. The minimum investment is only $1,000 per deal, and you only invest in the deals that make sense to you. So, if you want to get a behind-the-scenes look at the startups you know and love, if you want a chance to support their growth, and if you want another opportunity to profit as the Bitcoin ecosystem develops, check out the 60-second application in the show notes to get started today in building a world that runs on better money.
Whether it's like a wild conspiracy theory or, something that's just like, hey, this just happened, like say the lockdowns a few years ago. Whenever I come up against one of those problems and I ask myself, okay, so what would I do if one, none, or all of this were true? And the answer is always like, basically keep doing what I'm doing, look after myself, grow a garden, raise animals, grow nutrient dense food, be a producer, make things of value. Every time I've ever come across any issue in the world, that's what leads me back to this. What if I had a crystal ball and I could look into the future and I knew with absolute certainty that the corruption, or there's an asteroid or a pole reversal, there's something that's going to come in whatever 10, 15, 20 years from now, that it's not going to make any difference. There's nothing I could have done to prevent it. What would I do even then? And it's still the same thing.
Welcome to the Business Bitcoinization Show, the show dedicated to helping you enrich your life and grow your business with Bitcoin, the hardest money on planet Earth. I'm your host, Josh Friedemann, and our guest today is Takota Coen, who is a regenerative farmer, homestead designer, and freedom maximalist. We're going to be talking about his business, buildingyourhomestead.com today, as well as some things you need to be thinking about if you're interested in building a homestead in the future. Of course, before we get to our interview with Takota, we do have this week's Bitcoin Meetup Spotlight. And even before that, I want to thank those who have been supporting the podcast on Fountain in the last week. Thanks to those who have been streaming sats to the podcast, including No Waste BTC Signs, user 562-40419, and user 215-88970. Also, thanks to user 483-92758, who sent a boost that said, "Good one," about last week's episode with Pierre Corbin from Flash. If you would like to support the show as well, you can listen on the Fountain app and either stream sats as you listen, or you can send a boost. And if you include a message with that boost, I'll be sure to read it on the show. For this week's Bitcoin Meetup, we're going to Alberta, Canada, and the Edmonton Bitcoin Meetup. The Edmonton Bitcoin Meetup is open to anyone and everyone interested in learning, networking, developing, or investing in Bitcoin. Whether you've been in the space for a decade or just curious, come hang out and learn something new. Join fellow Bitcoiners for the next meetup on March 21st, starting at 7 p.m. for an engaging question and answer session on Bitcoin. Located at Code Jam Cafe Hackspace, this event is designed to deepen understanding, exchange insights, and foster connections within their growing community. Space is limited, so please only RSVP if you genuinely plan on attending. You can find the Edmonton Bitcoin Meetup on Twitter at YEG_Bitcoin or on their meetup page. Those links are down below, along with a link to the Oshi app, which you can use to find a Bitcoin meetup near you. Now, we're going to get to our interview with Takota right after this. Business owners, unlock the benefits Bitcoin has to offer your business with the Bitcoin for Business Quick Start Guide. This 27-page guide highlights the 6 ways you can grow your business with Bitcoin. Check it out in the show notes. Takota, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So I'd like to start off every single interview with a few questions that help us to get to know you a little bit better and to give us some insight for our own lives. So you ready for these?
You bet, man.
When and how did you first learn about Bitcoin?
So it's kind of a funny story. I first really learned about cryptocurrency, I'll say. I thought it was all the same thing. Probably back in, the 2018, something like that. I never really got into it. I saw it as a just a tool that, the government overlords could potentially use against us. So I just kind of stayed away from it. But then in 2021, I actually co-founded a company with one of the creators of Ethereum. And our goal was to create a cryptocurrency that would liberate humanity from the decay of our legacy financial systems by incentivizing the regeneration of Earth's ecosystems. So that was kind of our mission statement for the company. But after about a year of fighting with my colleagues about what a money would have to look like in order to achieve that vision, I started to realize that perfect money had already been created, and it was Bitcoin. So kind of a long way around, but I started to realize that there's a massive difference between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, particularly Ethereum. And now I'm a Bitcoin maxi myself.
So that raises a lot of questions in my mind that I'm going to table for now so we can get to question number 2, which is what's an insight or fact about Bitcoin that you wish everyone understood?
Yeah, for me, I think even if Bitcoin turns out to be some kind of a deep state psyop or something like that, I am so convinced that Bitcoin has the correct philosophy that, even like we have two options. We can stay in our current financial system, which is guaranteed to be corrupt. We know that it doesn't work. Or we can join a community that, even if there is some way that there's a backdoor, code or some way it's hacked in the future that, people haven't found yet. To me, it doesn't matter because the community itself is so anti-fragile. And so even if there is something that comes up, the philosophy of Austrian economics that's just embedded into the Bitcoin community, it'll only make us stronger if there ever is any weakness. That's I've heard people say that once it hits 21 million, Satoshi's face is going to pop up and it's going to laugh. It's like, well, even if it does that, I don't care because the communities is what really brings me to this.
Question number 3, what's the Bitcoin resource you most recommend to other people?
So it was the resource that woke me up while I was working with one of the co-founders of Ethereum there. It was Saifedean Ammous's books, the Fiat Standard and the Bitcoin Standard. They're just absolutely fantastic. And I can't recommend them enough.
Beyond Bitcoin, what's a resource, tool, or idea that's been helpful to you or your business recently?
So I would say, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. It's my all-time favorite. It is a fiction book, but it's currently becoming more and more like a nonfiction, by the day. And it's literally the blueprint for that our company here at buildingyourhomestead.com. That's literally our blueprint for how we want to help others to basically go on strike, exit the system, and build the new one.
Create Galt's Gulch.
Exactly. So our company before this was called Building Your Gulch, but very few people knew what it was. So we did a little refresh on the name, and now it's just Building Your Homestead.
Excellent. Now we have what we call our final arbitrary but insightful question, and it's this. As a general life principle, is it better to ask why or why not?
Yeah, I love this question. You gave me these a few days ago, so I've been kind of ruminating on it, and I actually think why is both these questions are important, but I think why is the kind of the thing that comes first. And there's a great quote that I came across that was, perfection is achieved not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. So I think that really distills down, but taking it to a more kind of philosophical level, because I believe that objective reality exists. I would say that we first have to ask why to try to understand what objective reality is. Versus if we're constantly asking why not, it makes the assumption that that whatever exists in reality doesn't have to be that way. So I think there's a difference between the metaphysical and the man-made. If you're dealing with something that's man-made, absolutely ask why not. But if you're dealing with something in nature, in the real world, you have to ask why is this here, and start from there as your kind of foundation.
Meet Linkster, your premier Bitcoin-focused advisor. Linkster caters to businesses, institutions, family offices, and high-net-worth individuals. They merge your unique financial goals and needs with Linkster's Bitcoin expertise to craft your own sustainable plan to preserve and grow the value of your hard-earned profits and retained earnings. At Linkster, it's not just advice, it's tailored execution. Connect directly with the founder by visiting linkster.com. That's LYNCSTER.com. Linkster. Secure your future with Bitcoin. Today's episode of Business Bitcoinization is proudly brought to you by Velis Commerce, where the future of business technology meets Bitcoin. As we journey through the era of Bitcoin and its transformational impact on businesses, there's one name that stands out: Velis Commerce. Whether you're looking to build a cutting-edge website, a seamless mobile app, or custom software, Velis is your go-to team. They've been diving deep into the world of Bitcoin since 2014, making them one of the most experienced groups for integrating Bitcoin and Lightning payments into a variety of digital platforms. But here's what truly sets them apart. Velis Commerce doesn't just build. They bring a wealth of knowledge to ensure your project's success from day one. Their team understands the nuances of Bitcoin, ensuring that your business stays ahead of the curve. And for all business Bitcoinization listeners out there, Velis Commerce is offering a free consultation to kickstart your project the right way. So if you're ready to future-proof your business in the coming age of hyper-Bitcoinization, head over to veliscommerce.com or reach out on Twitter at veliscommerce. Let's make sure your business thrives in the Bitcoin era. All right, Takota, I've told you this already, but just for the context that might be helpful for listeners, I'm a huge fan of your content. I discovered your work years ago connected to homesteading when I was first getting interested in regenerative farming, regenerative practices. And you were one of the first people I found on YouTube. I don't even quite know how, but excellent content there. You've been doing this for a long time. And then, I reached out to building your homestead on Orange Pill app and quickly got connected with you. It was cool to hear that you're now a Bitcoiner. So it seems like we've kind of gotten into Bitcoin about the same time. And I love what you're doing. One thing that Bitcoiners are interested in, I think, is making sure they're set up for success. They have, a resilient ecosystem in their lives, and a homestead can be a key part of that. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into it years ago before being a Bitcoiner and what you're doing now with building your homestead.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to be, born and raised on a 250 acre mixed organic farm up in Alberta, Canada here. I was really just born and raised into this kind of lifestyle. We've always grown our own food. We've always been self-sufficient. But it was really kind of after I got out of high school in around 2000, I graduated in 2010 and 2012, it became apparent to me that the problems of the world, once I was no longer just busy with, the next test or the next sports game or whatever it was, I started to see all these problems in the world and how many of them kind of rooted back to, how our agriculture was set up. And so that was kind of my first kind of experience down the rabbit hole was through just the problems of industrial agriculture. And the more I got into that, the more I started to see that these problems were, linked to other things. And then I went down the money rabbit hole and, various other kind of dead end conspiracies and things like that. And I'm grateful I did all of it. But no matter what over those years, I developed kind of what I call like my philosophical razor. So I don't know if you've heard of, the Occam's razor, which is, basically the simplest solution is usually the correct one. I think there's another guy who says, that which can be adequately explained by stupidity should never be attributed to evil. Is another one. So my own razor has been basically, whenever I come up against a problem that I see in the world, whether it's like a wild conspiracy theory or, something that's just like, hey, this just happened, like say the lockdowns a few years ago. Whenever I come up against one of those problems and I ask myself, okay, so what would I do if one, none, or all of this were true? And the answer is always like, basically keep doing what I'm doing, look after myself, grow a garden, raise animals, grow nutrient dense food, be a producer, make things of value. And so just every time I've ever come across any issue in the world, that's what leads me back to this. And the final kind of razor for me is, okay, what if I had a crystal ball and I could look into the future and I knew with absolute certainty that you know what, there's the corruption, or there's an asteroid or a pole reversal, there's something that's going to come in whatever 10, 15, 20 years from now, that it's not going to make any difference. There's nothing I could have done to prevent it. What would I do even then? And it's still the same thing. I would still live the life that I'm doing right now, work with the kind of people that I'm working with. So that's kind of where how I got into this world, and how I keep staying in it is, to summarize it, one of the kind of my first teachers, he's passed away now, Bill Mollison, said that gardening is permaculture is a revolution disguised as gardening. And that's really what I see homesteading is. It's a revolution disguised as just, growing fruits and vegetables and animals.
Now, before we get into what you're doing right now with building your homestead, how you can help people, I feel like homesteading is a increasingly used term. It's a popular term. I feel like it can cover a lot of things.
Yeah.
How would you define it? What does it include? And maybe also, if it would be helpful for people, what does it not include?
Yeah, so I think it'd be faster to talk about what it doesn't include, which I think is basically anything to do with the fiat world. Any of these centralized systems that we're seeing today. So it's all about taking personal responsibility. It's about, I think you can adopt a homesteading mindset if you live in an apartment building. You can grow things on your balcony. You can grow things inside. You can start to adopt this. It's about industriousness, creativity, self-sufficiency, preparedness, maybe a little bit of stoicism mixed in there, and also fun. Like you're going out into kind of uncharted territories. You're kind of a pioneer out in a space where there's not a lot of other people. So I think Bitcoiners, even if they don't live on land and aren't growing fruits and vegetables and animals, I think they're still have this kind of homesteading ethos. And yeah, that's what this is really about to me. And that's why we chose that name, is because we could have, I've been trained in regenerative agriculture and holistic management and permaculture and organic farm. I've done all those things, but to me, the one word that really captures the bit of the rebelliousness along with all the other things is this idea of homesteading.
So I think it would be interesting to hear about what your offer is and what you guys help people to do. And part of this, we've already had this conversation offline at a different time, but I think it would be helpful for people to begin thinking through, is this something that is helpful for me in the future, even if it's not right now? This is a type of thing that, as Bitcoin's price continues to appreciate significantly, people are going to have more money. They may want to go and create their own homestead. But there also might be people listening right now that are primed for what you have to offer. So if you would just explain kind of what your main offer is, how you can help people think through what homesteading could look like for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, our goal is to help homesteaders anywhere in the world to design and develop land for freedom, purpose, and abundance. So we can do that for you. We can do it with you, or you can do it yourself. So I've written a book that outlines, my 5-step process to design and develop land anywhere in the world. We do hourly consulting that can just be on a one-off basis, or retainer packages that are more cost effective. Or we also do homestead design packages where we'll work with you for basically 2 months straight, where we're helping you to clarify your goals, helping you to diagnose the property you already have, or help you to identify what property you need, come up with a comprehensive design for how all the different elements on that property will work synergistically together, just like an ecosystem, come up with an implementation plan for that, and a long-term monitoring plan to make sure that what are the early warning indicators that, you're heading in the right direction and you should speed up, or that you should start to, pump the brakes a bit. So yeah, we can really meet people anywhere they're at in that journey, whether they want that kind of the self-discovery, the DIY, or they want someone to really take the reins and do a lot of the heavy lifting for them.
So especially for the package where you're helping people to plan things out to a significant degree, how much land would it be helpful to have for that to make sense for someone? Like, are we talking a 5 or 10 acre thing? Or are we talking a 100-acre situation?
Yeah. So right now we've got clients that have been, in that, 4 to 5 acre range up to 500 acres. But I've also worked with clients on, 30,000 acre ranches. So, we can kind of do anywhere in between. In terms of where, we can really maximize the value of like our homestead design package, it really should be, a couple acres in a rural environment because of the restrictions of, property development in urbans or peri-urban areas. There's really not much you can do. And the sites are quite simple where it's, if you only got, 1,000 square foot lawn, it's like, well, probably just book a call and in an hour we can, give you all the advice that you'd need. But as soon as you get onto these, larger, 1, 2, 3 plus acre properties, it can get quite complex to figure out how to optimize whatever piece of ground you've got.
So what are the things, if people are interested in buying land in the future? Obviously, if you have land already, then you have what you have. But if you're buying land in the future, what should you be looking for? Are there some kind of general principles that considerations people should bring to the table when they're looking to buy land?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a matrix that I call the kind of order of operations, or your property resources, and just like Bitcoiners are math lovers, I'm sure. So you remember the PEDMIS or BEDMIS back in algebra, which is like parentheses, exponents, division, multiplication, so on. So that order of operations, if you got a math problem, if you don't do it in that order, you won't get the right answer. And so in property development, it's the same thing, but it starts with geography, then it goes to climate, then it goes to water, access, structures, fencing, flora, fauna, business, technology, and soils. And the things at the top are the hardest to change and the most impactful on everything beneath them. And the things that are at the bottom are the easiest to change and the least impactful on the things above them. So they all interconnect and they all influence each other, but there is that kind of order of operations, or as another fellow who kind of developed a similar version of this, P.A. Yeomans called it a scale of permanence. It's really important that you think about the elements that are higher on the list. So your geography and climate and water and access and structures, those are really influential, and you have to get them right. You have to also think about what your goals are too, because if your goals are to grow, subtropical fruits, and you want to have, bananas and mangoes and avocados and figs, you can do that in a greenhouse in the subarctic area. And I know guys that are doing it. It's really labor intensive and it's expensive. So that might help to shift kind of where you're looking at buying. And then so doing an analysis of those things, clarifying your goals, coming up with what I call a list of non-negotiables. So if you know that, okay, I need to buy land within 100-mile radius of this city because that's where my work is or my family or whatever it is, just the more things that you can come up with to reduce the possibility, the more constraints, the better. And then when you get kind of zoom in, closer to the property itself, what I look for is something with, in terms of geography, like a little bit of slope. So I like terrain, and you want some slope and some flat spots. Ideally, you've got, a creek or some kind of water body that's on it or flowing, ideally flowing through it, starting at the high point and flowing down. Because, then you can use all kinds of amazing gravity water systems. It's really expensive and difficult to pump water uphill, but it's effortless to get it to flow down. Ideally, there's, decent soils. You've got some trees, some grasses, some open land that's good for gardening. And surprisingly, if your budget allows, it doesn't have a lot of structures or fences. most people, or even access, most roads, buildings, and fences are put in the wrong place, or they're built improperly, and it can cost more money to to get rid of them than it can just to build them properly in the right amount of the right thing at the right time in the right place. So yeah, I know that's a lot to wrap your head around, but that's kind of my matrix when I start to look at any piece of land or advise someone as they're looking to buy a new piece.
That's very helpful, and I'm sure there will be a couple people at least that will, go back and re-listen to that portion, because there's a whole lot there. The water portion kind of stuck out to me. I don't know how much you do this or how much you've done the research, but it's something that I've tried to look into, and the amount of resources out there are not that great. The idea of using hydro electricity and powering your house with it is that how much water do you have to have flowing to do that in a way that you don't have to have too many concerns about being able to use electricity when you want to at your house?
Yeah, so living off grid can be challenging, but I do think microhydro stuff like that is actually it's surprising how little you need to be able to live a good life. But with that, it's not so much the volume of water, it's the head pressure. So like the distance it falls. For example, I've worked with clients who they were able to develop I think it was like a 1200 watt system, just a small turbine, and it fit in like a garden shed style building. That only took, it was like a 2-inch, maybe 2 or 3-inch pipe. And that basically ran their whole property. Now, the thing is, it was falling, I think 200 feet before it got to that shed. And so that's the tricky part, because if you get that high pressure, you don't need a lot of volume. If you don't have the pressure, you need a lot of volume to flow through. And but sadly, the biggest restriction on things like microhydro isn't the whether or not you've got the water or the head pressure. It's the bureaucrats. It's whether or not someone's going to come in and put a lock on your doors because you put something in the creek that wasn't supposed to be there. So that's usually the bigger limiting factor. And if we go back to my order of operations matrix, geography, land use bylaw or covenants or any kind of restrictions that are regional based, those are things that I really stress folks understand before they buy a property, because that's where most of the headaches come from, is actually what you're not allowed to do on your property because some bureaucrat said so. One
of the things that attracted me most about your content was how much of a systems thinker you are, like your hub and spoke system, at least at the property where you're filming this content. I don't know how much you do that with all the other, your clients, but it's such a great process. It makes things as efficient as they can be. What are some things that people in general, if you're looking to start a homestead, you've already mentioned, some people might want to, do like tropical fruits or something like that, in suboptimal places or places where it will require more work. In general, though, what are some things that a lot of people should be considering for a homestead that they're trying to kind of start from square one?
Yeah. So I would say probably one of the most underutilized elements on any homestead is animals. Like the amount of work and value that you can get out of just a few chickens or a few pigs or a dairy animal is just phenomenal. Like the amount of fertility they bring in, the amount of digging and scratching and rooting and pest management, and even just like quality of life. Like there's a reason people like to be out in nature and watch birds and, look at, a deer drinking from a stream of water. There's this kind of, I call it, vicarious well-being that we get from just being in diverse ecosystems. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by, incorporating animal systems into their properties. But I think a lot of that is due to the fact that they've been so industrialized and there's been so much fear mongering that's been put out by, all the diseases and illnesses that, whatever animal you're looking at getting can have. like if you get any book on almost any animal, whether it's bees or chickens or pigs or dairy cows, doesn't matter. The first 10 pages of the book will be all the things that the cow needs or the pig needs. And the other 90 pages of a 100-page book will be how to treat all the diseases that it gets. And what I found with my work in systems thinking is that those diseases and pests are actually indicators that there's something out of balance in the ecosystem. And that if you address the root cause of those problems, you won't get those diseases and illnesses and pests. So like we've been organic since 1988, and we don't use any chemicals of any kind, no fertilizers, no drugs, no hormones, nothing, no vaccines. And it's actually really easy to raise animals this way, but you have to get the systems right. Like if the animals are living in their own crap or they're not rotationally grazed properly, they are going to get those parasites and diseases, or if they don't have proper ventilation. But as long as you get the systems right, they become, your most valuable employees on your property that can help you to accomplish, so much goals, whether it's prepping your garden beds in the spring or helping to pull, quack grass out of a garden bed, or just, building the fertility anywhere on your property. So yeah, animal systems are just so misunderstood and undervalued. And that's, however, if you don't get it right, you're basically running a bed and breakfast, and now you're working for your animals, and you don't have any time to do anything else because all the pigs got out again, or it's freezing, and I got to go give the animals water, and so now you're just basically a maid working for these animals. So that's the other piece that I think people get wrong is they get into it and they want to get animals right away, and they don't have the systems for it, and it just results in drudgery.
Now, one thing I didn't ask about earlier that you had brought up is your book. I actually didn't realize that you had written a book, and that's on me. Is that something that someone could find on Amazon or wherever else, or is it primarily at your website?
No, it's on Amazon. There's also an audio recording that you can get for it. There's also PDF versions, and it is quite high level. Like I want to stress that if folks are getting this book, it's not a how-to book for how to garden or how to dig water harvesting features or plant fruit trees. This is a systems approach to how do you design and develop land. It's not about technique. It's really about the strategy of it.
Well, I would highly recommend people check out your content on YouTube. There's just so much good stuff there, and it will cause you to believe in the organic approach. And I'm glad you brought that up earlier, because that's one of those things that I didn't even think to bring up, because that's just so much a part of the regenerative movement, but that's still so different than everything else. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I want to get you some final thoughts in a minute on all that we've talked about. Before that, though, I'd be interested to maybe dig down briefly into some of your learnings from trying to create your own cryptocurrency and then realizing that Bitcoin was the answer. I don't know how much you want to get into that. And, if you want to keep a surface level, that's okay. But, what were you trying to do, and where did it fall short where Bitcoin doesn't?
I mentioned kind of our vision statement for the original company and why I signed up for it, which was to liberate humanity from the decay of our legacy financial systems, while incentivizing the regeneration of Earth's ecosystems. So Cole's notes is we were going to develop a cryptocurrency that would be tied to the health of ecosystems. So we had we were working with satellite companies to come up with metrics where we could create a baseline measurement of the health of every square foot of planet Earth. And then as that land was regenerated via the metrics that we set, the landowners would be issued tokens. And so in the same way that, when a gold miner goes out and mines gold, our society values that. And so they're incentivized to mine more gold. So on a surface level, it seemed like a good idea. But when we got into the weeds of like, how would this work and who would be allowed to compete and what would happen if people burned down the rainforest and then tried to regenerate it, and how would we create all these, can basically stop these bad actors. And then the biggest problem for me was have you ever heard or seen the movie or read the book, The Watchmen?
I don't think so.
So it's a book about these like superheroes that
Oh yeah. I haven't seen the movie. I know what you're talking about now.
Okay, so it's a fantastic movie. And anyways, there's a question that someone paints on the side of a wall, basically as society's falling apart, and it's who watches the watchers. And really, that was the biggest problem for me as we kind of dug into it. I was starting to see how all of these things came back to, yeah, but like, what if we get corrupted, or what if we make a mistake? What if we set the wrong metric? What if we incentivize the wrong thing? What if we create a DAO and then the DAO gets taken over by Bill Gates or or whatever it was? And every kind of problem came in with like, well, we'll just give ourselves more power. And it started to snowball. And because of my understanding of the current fiat system, and even my colleagues had the same, we've read the Creature from Jekyll Island and are familiar with how central banks work. I just started to see that we were literally just creating our own central bank, and it was going to have all these problems. And so I really pulled back, thought through from base principles, like what would it have to be? It'd have to be totally decentralized from the start, and kind of worked my way through it. And I was getting a ton of resistance from my colleagues on this because it just seemed so crazy. And then when I read Seyfuddin Ammus's book about what Bitcoin is and how it was created in the just the ingeniousness behind it, it was like, well, this is already done. And not only that, is that by creating a hard money, it would lower people's time preference and the environmental problems would go away, because no one wants to crap in their own bed. And so if people have the ability to save for the future, they'll think long-term and they'll start to care for the planet. And so, all of our schemes for how we were going to incentivize the right behavior I just saw it as like, this is dangerous, at worst, and just ineffectual at best. And really all we need is just a sound financial system that no one can game, and everybody wins, including the us who are trying to, do the right thing and build one of these systems. So yeah, that was kind of the long and the short of how it all came about. So as a result of pushing for these things and just getting set back, and eventually I started to realize that I think it was a bit more than ignorance or a lack of understanding. Some of the associations that Ethereum has with organizations like the World Economic Forum and they're literally building the central bank digital currencies. When I started to see those connections, I handed in my shares for the company and walked away because I wanted nothing to do with it.
Well, very interesting. Hopefully that will be instructive for some people who are listening either right now or in the future. Maybe share some final thoughts to finish up this episode, maybe some action steps you would recommend for people, as well as where people can go to find out more about what you guys are doing and maybe watch some of your content.
Yeah, you bet. So I think I mentioned it earlier in the podcast about how the homesteading is a revolution disguised as gardening, and I really think that's a critical piece that people that even I didn't understand for years. It's when we see these massive problems like, the Federal Reserve and the political corruption and, the corporatocracies and like all these things, these are big, massive problems that are on a global level. And it seems like that there's nothing we can do about it. And what I've started to realize is that the only thing that keeps those systems going is our dependence on them. And so when we start to look after ourselves and become self-sufficient, when we don't need those systems anymore, they become irrelevant. They require our voluntary consent in order to continue. And so once we no longer need them, they will disappear on their own, or they will become so egregiously immoral, as they are increasingly doing that. But even with things like the mandates that we saw a few years ago, now we're seeing in press conferences where they're saying, no, they were never mandatory. We never forced anybody to take the shot or to do certain things. It was only suggestions. So I think it's important for people to realize that these systems are voluntary. They need our consent to continue to the extent that they are. And the best way is to be able to bite the hand so you can't bite the hand that feeds you. So you have to learn how to feed yourself. And our society or civilization rests on an agricultural basis. Like without that primary need met, there can't be the division of labor. And so, it starts with even though it seems like it won't have that massive effect, as we start to build out, one homestead at a time, that's the revolution. And the best part is it's fun. I like to say that no one wants to join your revolution if it sucks. and that's why I love Bitcoiners, because they're all about that quality of life, lowering time preference and talking about how much fun it is and how much better our system is. We're not trying to guilt anyone into this or use fear or anything else. This is just, live the best life you can, reduce your dependence on the system, and exit and build.
Excellent. Well, Takota, I appreciate your time. Actually, you know what? You need to let people know where they can find out more about you.
Yeah. So if folks, are resonating with this, kind of wherever you're at in your homesteading journey, whether you already have property or you're looking for it, or even if you still live in the city, you can go to buildingyourhomestead.com. We've got lots of free resources there, as well as, our different services where we can, we can help you do it yourself. We can do it with you, or we can do it for you. We'll help you build your homestead.
Excellent. Takota, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thanks, Josh.
Well, friends, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Business Bitcoinization Show. If you want to reach out to either me or Takota, you can find those links down in the show notes, and definitely check out Takota's YouTube channel as well. As always, keep building, keep growing, and until next time, keep living and leading well. If you're a regular listener of the podcast, thank you. If you want to take a further step in your support for the show, you can help us grow by listening on Fountain, a value-for-value podcast app on iOS or Android. If you hear something you like that you disagree with or anything else, you can share it by sending some sats and adding a comment with your thoughts. Some of you have already done this, and I appreciate it. I'm going to begin reading your boosts on upcoming episodes, so if you have some insight or value to add, let the people know. Getting started with Fountain is easy. You can add Bitcoin to your Fountain wallet by using your fiat accounts or any Lightning wallet. And one of my favorite features is that once you're using the app, you can earn sats just by listening on Fountain. Check out the link in the show notes to get started with Fountain today.